Feudalism in the Middle Ages by Chase Thompson and Kelsey Patterson. I'm going to give you a little bit of knowledge about feudalism and give you our take on what we learned.
What is feudalism? A social system, royalty controlled land, gave it to their people in return for their services such as military, workdays/chores, providing tools or equipment for soldiers such as clothes or weapons.
I'm going to give you some background information about feudalism. Feudalism started in the 8th century. It became very popular in the 10th century. It was known throughout Europe. It began with William the Conqueror and the Normans after the defeat of the English Anglo-Saxons. It was the Battle of Hastings. It started as a way to reward people for help in battle, and it gave King the ability to force people to work for him. These workers had a responsibility to have an allegiance to the king. It was important that they followed all of his directions and laws. How feudalism began after the fall of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire fell in 476 CE. People were scared and there was chaos. No political system was in place at this time. Um, the kings and the nobles created feudalism as a way to establish protection and order. The higher class provided protection for the lower classes, and the lower classes had to give the king a favor, which would either be military protection or food or services or whatever he needed. This sense of unity prevented invasions and other people attacking them because the whole empire was on the same page, and it accounted for all social aspects and gave people order. I found this picture online, and it's basically a power hierarchy of feudalism in the early Middle Ages. At the top, you have the king, who was the ruler of everything. Underneath of the king, you have the nobles, which included the barons, who reported directly to the king and was very important. Under the nobles, you have the knights, which will also be called the vassals. And underneath of them, you have the peasants, which are also known as serfs. And basically, what this was the serfs had to grow crops and they got food. That was their responsibility. And then the knights provided military protection. And what was cool about the knights is that they were hoping that one day they could move up in the rankings and become a noble. And the barons and the nobles basically ran the kingdom, and they helped the king with money situations and gave him suggestions and made sure everything was good to go.
The king. The king was the absolute ruler. Whatever the king said was the law, but he had nobles in place to keep everything in check. For example, William the Conqueror. Barons and nobles. Barons were very powerful and they reported everything to the king, handled land and gave responsibilities to lord to run manors. The richest nobles lived in beautiful castles and manors, treated with the utmost respect, made sure the feudal code was never broken. It was a way of checks and balances. All nobles once were knights and fought in the military. Knights. During war, knights were forced to fight for a minimum of 40 days, loyal to the king and the kingdom. If they survived, this time could be lengthened. Their time usually lasted 90 days. They had hopes of working their way up to the kingdom so one could earn money, title, respect in a huge manner. Freemen and serfs. These were the poorer individuals who were treated badly. Farmers were given land when they grew a lot of crops and provided for the hierarchy.
Over time, In Europe, feudalism changed. The reasons being is because currency reappeared and more people had power due to money. When you're dealing with money and trading and who has more money essentially, you have power and you're allowed to do more things. Trading was also a big thing that they came back to, and the king decided to take recontrol a lot of his land because people couldn't afford it, and they didn't really need feudalism anymore due to invasions, and the social system was pretty much out there. Um, Also, another thing that changed feudalism completely was religion, and as I've said before, religion was everywhere in Europe, and this changed the whole dynamic of feudalism. In this slide, we're going to talk about the evolution and decline of feudalism. Feudalism began in the early 8th century and eventually ended around the 10th century. Christianity was apparent at the end of the feudalism era, and this was important because religion was taking over all of Europe. Feudalism was effective for hundreds of years. Um, the reason for a decline is because a strong government was established, and this made it different for the roles of the people. Also, nobles became very weak, and peasants moved away from the country, and they were allowed to eventually buy their freedom. The king took back power and land, and this was very important actually, because the king, obviously having the divine power he did, had the ability to take back power and land. Land-based economy to money-based economy was apparent. More money and trading became a thing instead of trading for land. And the biggest, one of the most important reasons for the decline was the Black Death, and this reduced the population about one third of England, and thousands of people died. Also, medicine wasn't established back then, so the um, the recovery rate was almost non-existent.